Hey guys, tonight we crawl into one of history's most beautiful lies, the Victorian bed. From a distance, it looks like something out of a fairy tale. Carved mahogany headboard, layers of lace, a towering canopy swaying gently above your head. But don't get too cozy just yet. You probably won't survive this night. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, drop your location and your current time in the comments. Let's see who else is trying to fall asleep across the world right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You ease the wooden door shut behind you, hearing that low creak echo through the narrow corridor. A single candle flickers on the side table, casting long shadows across an elegant room filled with more fabric than any bedroom probably needs. You're standing in the heart of the 1870s, England maybe, and it's time for bed. The mattress in front of you is shorter than you expected. In fact, you'd barely fit in it stretched out, and you're not even tall. Victorian beds were famously compact, partly because people slept differently, and partly because they layered them like cakes. Feather beds stacked atop straw ticking, with more padding on top of that. If you were rich, it was indulgent. If you were poor, it was straw and hope. You climb in carefully, trying not to make a sound, but the wooden frame groans beneath you, every joint and slat announcing your presence. There's no metal spring base here. It's ropes and boards, and some of them feel like they're losing the war against gravity. And oh boy, this pillow. It's filled with something that vaguely resembles down, but feels more like soggy cotton wrapped around pebbles. You shift your weight. A loud creak. Another. Your attempt to find a comfortable position turns into an unintended percussion concert. Still, you lie back and exhale, watching the heavy velvet canopy above you sway, just slightly. It's beautiful, you can't deny that. But as the warmth of the candle fades and the chills start settling in from the stone walls, that bed becomes a cage more than a comfort. You're realizing quickly, this isn't a place to rest, it's a place to endure. This is what the Victorians called luxury. But it's only section 1, and it's going to get a lot weirder from here. You lie there staring upward at the fabric that hangs from the canopy, like a grand theater curtain, wondering whether it's meant to protect you or smother you in your sleep. Victorian decor, especially in bedrooms, was all about opulence. Layers on layers on layers. Drapes around the bed, drapes on the walls. Even the furniture seemed to be clothed. The weight of the bedding is already pressing against your chest, but now you're becoming aware of the air, or rather, the lack of it. Everything feels stale. The curtains around the bed, lined with thick damask or velvet, aren't just for decoration. They were practical too. In freezing winters, they helped keep the cold out. But there's a price. No air circulation. You're breathing in fabric dust, old candle smoke, and maybe the remnants of someone else's perfume from days ago. You tug at the bedspread, revealing yet another layer underneath, each one heavier than the last. The Victorians loved texture, silk, wool, embroidered linens, but sleep wasn't supposed to feel like you're lying beneath a stack of Victorian novels. Now you shift again, trying to find a spot that doesn't feel like the bed is fighting back. With each move, particles rise into the air from the fabric, invisible, but you sense them. The drapes above you have probably never been washed. It wasn't really a thing, you know. Steam cleaning didn't exactly exist. and you certainly weren't stripping bed curtains every week. So what lived in that cloth? Historians still argue whether these bed curtains were more symbolic than practical, a way to display status and privacy rather than actually improve sleep. But one thing's certain, the wealthier the home, the heavier the room felt. And in this bed, surrounded by so much finery, you're starting to feel claustrophobic. You try to peek out through the curtains, hoping for some relief, but it's just a darker shadow out there. Every edge is lined, every crack covered. You're in a cocoon of culture, yes, but one that doesn't let you breathe. And if you think it couldn't get worse, wait until your skin starts to itch. Because what's hiding in those folds of fabric is something no romantic novel ever warned you about. At first, it's subtle, just a tickle near your ankle. Then your scalp starts to tingle. You shift under the covers and scratch your arm. That little sensation you hoped was your imagination? It's not. Welcome to the great lice war of the Victorian bedtime. You didn't think you were alone in this bed, did you? As you lie back against the pillow, your fingers brush a tiny lump, one that wasn't there before. Bedbugs, lice, fleas, they were all nightly visitors, and no class was truly safe from them. Sure, the rich could afford fancier sheets and perfumed powders, but that didn't stop the critters from showing up. In fact, those layers of unwashed fabric you admired, they're five-star hotels for parasites. Victorian hygiene standards were, let's call them, developing. People bathed far less frequently than we do today. Hair was often powdered or pinned up for weeks, and bedding wasn't stripped regularly. Instead of changing sheets, many simply aired them out or beat them with sticks. You know, real effective bug removal. Historians still argue whether lice were truly seen as a hygiene issue or just a fact of life. For many Victorians, having lice wasn't considered disgusting, just inconvenient. Some even believed it kept your blood healthy, like little medical leeches. Yes, really. You're now imagining tiny creatures crawling in your hair, aren't you? To combat the infestation, people tried everything from vinegar rinses to coal dust. And in some homes, children were shaved bald during summers to let the scalp breathe, though mostly to get rid of the lice. Still scratching, bedbug bites were even worse. Red welts, itching, and that distinct musty smell in the linens. They lived in wooden bed frames behind wallpaper, even inside mattress seams. Once they moved in, they stayed. Think of it as a historical Airbnb, except you're the unwilling guest. You try to adjust your position again, careful not to press too hard against the headboard. Rumor had it that bedbugs poured out of cracks in the night like a biblical plague. And if you dare complain about the bugs, just remember, servants often slept on straw mattresses on cold stone floors. If you had a mattress at all, you were already winning. So go ahead, try to ignore that itch. Pull the covers tight and pretend that rustling sound was just your imagination. You shift in the bed again, but now your thoughts are stuck on what's inside it. The mattress, if you can even call it that, has the lumpy, uneven texture of something that's lived many lives before you. And it probably has. Victorian mattresses weren't your cozy, memory foam dreams. They were more like bags of secrets stuffed by people who didn't expect you to ask too many questions. Depending on your class, you might be lying on a sack filled with straw, horsehair, old wool, moss, feathers, or, well, things we'll pretend are feathers. You run your hand across the fabric. It's rough, stiff, and has the distinct sound of something crunching inside. There's no plastic or rubber barrier here. Whatever's in there, It's had direct contact with decades of sweat, oils, and worse. Hygiene practices were minimal. Cleaning a mattress wasn't really a thing. More often they were aired out in the sun or beaten with sticks. Again, because apparently Victorians thought most things could be solved by beating them with sticks. Historians still debate whether featherbeds were truly softer or just more fashionable. One thing they do agree on: they stank. All natural fillings absorbed everything: body odor, smoke from candles, chamber pot fumes, and the dampness of stone-walled bedrooms. The more luxurious the mattress, the more likely it smelled like a mixture of mildew and sheep. You dig deeper, not literally, of course, though the idea is tempting, and wonder how long it would take to remake such a bed. Servants often spent hours fluffing, smoothing, and arranging each layer. The poor didn't have that luxury. Most slept on flattened piles of hay, changed seasonally, or whenever the bugs got too bold. And we're not even going to talk about mold. Okay, maybe just a little. The Victorian era was damp. Mattresses often rested on wooden frames with little air circulation. Dampness meant fungus, which meant spores. You're probably breathing some in right now. You cough lightly, hoping it's just in your imagination. But the more you think about it, the more the mattress feels like a giant sponge of past lives, compressed, aged, and waiting to share its memories with your lungs. So go on, snuggle into that 19th century mystery bag. Try not to wonder what or who slept there before you. And definitely try not to breathe too deeply. You try to nestle deeper into the bed, but instead of comfort, you're met with what feels like a wool-wrapped boulder pinning you down. The blankets, are less like cozy covers and more like a medieval form of restraint. Victorians believed in layers. Not 2 or 3, mind you, but 5, 6, sometimes more. Heavy wool, tightly woven flannel, quilted eiderdowns, perhaps even a fur throw if you were fancy or just dramatically cold. These weren't light, airy comforters. These were weighted slabs of textile meant to crush the cold, and incidentally, your rib cage. You try to roll over, but the top half of your body can't quite follow the bottom. It's like being hugged by a sleepy bear, which sounds sweet until you realize you can't move or breathe properly. Why so many layers? Central heating didn't exist, of course. A fireplace might warm the room a little before bed, but by midnight it would be cold enough to see your breath. Victorians compensated by piling on blankets like bricks, and in some households they did use actual bricks, hot water bottles or ceramic bed warmers heated by the fire and wrapped in cloth to prevent burns, unless they leaked, which they often did. And did I mention dust? All those fibers, all that wool, they weren't exactly allergy-friendly. Every time you shift, a small invisible cloud rises into the air. No wonder people woke up wheezing. Historians still argue whether the weight of the bedding helped people feel secure or just added to their nightly torment. There are accounts of people being tucked in so tightly they had to sleep still as statues. Some even used metal bed cradles to hold blankets off their feet, not for comfort, but to avoid ulcers and frostbite. You try to stretch your toes, but they don't make it past the third blanket. Somewhere down there is your foot, possibly frozen or crushed. You're starting to understand why some Victorians slept sitting up, and we'll get to that later. But for now, you lie motionless, pinned like a butterfly between fabric and fear, the weight of the night pressing down on you, both literally and metaphorically. Victorian romance, huh? You're 5 layers deep in it, and still, not even halfway to sleep. You thought maybe the clothes would help. After all, if the bed was an unpredictable medieval puzzle, surely the Victorians must have gotten the sleepwear right. Right? Wrong. You sit up slightly, tugging at the collar of your nightshirt. It's tight, starched, and the lace is scratchy enough to exfoliate a lizard. Victorian sleepwear wasn't designed for comfort. It was designed for modesty. You weren't going to bed. You were stepping into another performance. If you're a man, you're in a long buttoned-up cotton or flannel nightshirt. Not unlike what Ebenezer Scrooge wore, complete with a nightcap that kept your head warm while making you look mildly ridiculous. If you're a woman, you're probably wrapped in multiple layers, long chemise, woolen underskirt, perhaps even a corset pad removed halfway through the day, but still lingering somewhere near your ribs. Victorians feared nighttime exposure. Drafts were believed to cause disease, so covering every bit of skin, including your wrists, ankles, and sometimes fingers, was part of the nightly ritual. The irony? All this coverage, and you're still cold. The materials didn't help much either. Cotton wasn't always soft. Flannel was rough. Wool? Let's just say, if you moved too fast in your sleep, you risked rug burn. Historians still argue whether sleepwear was more about class signaling than function. The more decorated and stiff your nightclothes, the more refined you seemed. Comfort, apparently, was for the weak. And it wasn't just the feel. It was the process. Getting dressed for bed took time. You needed help sometimes, especially with layered nightgowns or bed jackets. And undressing? Not too quickly, unless you wanted to scandalize the wallpaper. You scratch your neck, now mildly inflamed from the lace collar digging into your skin. And your arms? Swaddled tight, like you're about to be embalmed, not tucked in. Add to that the fireplace dwindling to embers and your breath fogging in the air, and you realize, no matter how heavily you're dressed, the chill still finds a way in. But you can't remove a layer, because then the room would judge you. Or at least, that haunting portrait above the mantel might. So you lie back again, bound in cotton, breathing shallow through the collar, hoping your itchy knees don't betray you. At this point, you'd trade the romance of lace for a cheap fleece hoodie from Walmart. But that's the thing with Victorian bedtime. It wasn't about what helped you sleep. It was about what made you look proper while suffering through it. Just when you think you've managed to settle in, bundled under the crushing weight of blankets and wrapped in your scratchy cotton cocoon, a creak from the far side of the bed reminds you you're not alone. Victorian bedrooms weren't the sanctuaries of solitude we imagine today. In fact, the concept of a private, personal bed, all to yourself, was often a fantasy reserved for the elite. For most Victorians, especially the middle and lower classes, sleeping arrangements were all about sharing. You might have one mattress for a couple and all their children, or for a group of siblings. In some homes, servants slept at the foot of the master's bed, or even directly in the same bed to be on call during the night. And if you were truly lucky, you might get a bed to yourself, but not a room. Most families bundled into shared spaces, huddled together for warmth and necessity. You shift again, and the blankets tug in a different direction. There's a sudden grunt. Someone's elbow nudges your ribs. It's not malicious. They're just trying to escape the same heat trap you're stuck in. And it wasn't just people. Victorians often let dogs sleep in their beds, not just for comfort, but for warmth. A small terrier tucked under the covers was called a hot water bottle that barked. Charming, until it had fleas. Or an opinion about your feet. Historians still debate whether this communal sleep culture created more emotional bonds or just spread more lice. Probably both. But there's no denying it was normal. The idea of having your space was more psychological than physical. You slept where you could, with whomever fit. The intimacy of the arrangement also led to a strange mix of affection and annoyance. Whispered stories before sleep, the warmth of another body beside you, but also the constant shifting, snoring, elbowing, and accidental blanket theft that came with it. You try to claim a little territory, maybe a knee's worth of space, but the moment you do, your bedmate turns and drapes an arm across you like a damp towel. You consider slipping to the edge, but then you remember. Victorian beds were often narrow. One wrong shift, and you're on the floor with the chamber pot. So you sigh, melt into the creaking mattress, and accept the company, human or otherwise. Personal space, it seems, is a modern dream. And tonight, you're living the full Victorian reality. No sleep, no silence, and absolutely no room to stretch your legs. It's well past midnight now, and just as you start to drift into a shallow, uneasy slumber, nature calls. And in Victorian times, when nature called, you begged it to leave a message instead. There's no bathroom down the hall, no soft glowing motion sensor light to guide you. Instead, you roll over, carefully, so as not to disturb your tightly packed bedfellows. And remember the porcelain horror lurking beneath the bed, the chamber pot. You grope around in the darkness, half blind, and your fingers finally brush the cold, curved rim of the pot. It's cold. Everything is cold. The floor beneath the bed is stone or poorly finished wood, and stepping onto it barefoot is a kind of punishment Victorian parents probably used on purpose. Some people kept slippers by the bed. Others used night shoes, thick, ugly things made of felt or wool, designed to keep your toes from freezing off while you stumbled half asleep across the room. But even with them, you couldn't avoid the chill that bit into your ankles. You stand, or try to. Your blankets resist, your nightshirt tangles, and your joints protest. You finally manage to shuffle toward the chamber pot, hoping against hope that it's been emptied recently. Spoiler, it hasn't. Victorians called it a necessary, which is accurate if deeply underwhelming. Wealthier households might have theirs emptied by a servant each morning, but in middle or lower class homes, it might sit there for days. Covered? Maybe. Smelling like lilacs? Absolutely not. Historians still argue whether the chamber pot was better than braving the outside. And for many, it was. Nighttime toilet trips often meant slipping outside into a backyard privy or freezing outhouse. So you can imagine which option most people picked, even if it meant sharing sleeping quarters with your own bodily achievements. You squat, silently praying no one stirs, and that your porcelain enemy doesn't tip over. The silence of the room only makes every sound louder. A drip, a breath, the creak of the bed behind you. Somewhere in the corner, something shifts. A mouse? A sibling? Hard to say. Finished, you fumble your way back into bed, colder now than when you got up. Your feet are numb, your dignity slightly bruised, and the smell in the room is not exactly lavender. And the worst part? You'll probably have to go again before dawn. You pull the blankets over your head, hoping the weight will crush your memories of the past 5 minutes. You now understand why some Victorians skipped dinner. Less food meant fewer chamber pot visits. Sleep? You can try. But this bed has other plans. You burrow back under the covers, determined to finally fall asleep. But just as your eyelids begin to flutter, a chilling draft sneaks in from somewhere. and now your toes are freezing again. Welcome to the delicate balancing act of firelight and freezing toes, the nightly Victorian dilemma. Earlier in the evening, a fire had crackled gently in the bedroom hearth. If you were lucky or wealthy, a servant lit it for you an hour before bedtime, giving the room a warm glow and a comforting scent of burning coal or wood. But that fire was never meant to last all night. You couldn't just keep tossing logs onto it like a camping trip. Fuel was expensive, and constant stoking was considered wasteful, if not downright dangerous. Now the fire has faded to faint embers, casting long, dancing shadows across the ceiling. It's beautiful, yes, but the warmth? Gone. In its place is a creeping cold that starts at your feet and works its way up like ivy. No matter how many blankets you pile on, the chill finds you. Victorian houses were notoriously drafty. Thin walls, no insulation, windows that rattled with every breeze. You could seal the windows, yes, but that trapped the air, the dust, and that persistent chamber pot smell. And let's not forget, heating a bedroom was a luxury. Many families reserved the warmth for shared living spaces, leaving bedrooms to fend for themselves. In poorer homes, the fire wasn't lit at all. People simply wore more clothes to bed, or, as mentioned before, slept in groups to conserve heat. Some folks placed bricks heated in the oven at the foot of the bed. Others used hot water bottles wrapped in cloth. And the wealthiest had ornate copper bed warmers, long-handled pans filled with coals, swept between the sheets to toast them before entry. Sounds cozy, right? Except when someone forgot to remove it, or it scorched the sheets. Or worse, the mattress caught fire. Historians still argue whether the psychological comfort of firelight helped people sleep better, even if the physical heat was fleeting. Some even say the flickering light acted like a primitive nightlight, easing fears of things lurking in the dark, both imagined and real. You pull your toes tighter under the blankets, trying to tuck them between layers like forgotten coins. But it's useless. The cold has claimed them. It doesn't help that your nightshirt only goes so far, and your woolen socks, if you remembered to wear them, are slowly unthreading from the inside out. The fire's out. The floor's ice. The night drags on, and while the bed may be crowded, there's still no warmth like the one you're missing. Real heat, real sleep. But there's no turning back now. You're only halfway through this Victorian night. As the last ember dies and silence takes hold, a new tension creeps in. Not from the cold this time, but from the shadows. You lie still, eyes barely open, trying not to blink too loudly. Because in this stillness, the bedroom begins to feel less like a place of rest and more like a stage set for a seance. Welcome to the ghost stories and gloom that haunted many a Victorian night. You're surrounded by darkness, save for the faint moonlight filtering through thick drapes. The wallpaper, once charming in daylight, now twists into warped faces and florals that seem to move when you're not looking. That chair in the corner? Definitely just a pile of clothes. Probably. Victorians were obsessed with death. Mourning was an entire subculture, with its own fashion, etiquette, and even furniture. Death portraits were common. Photos of loved ones posed as if they were merely asleep, and sometimes displayed in the very bedrooms they died in. A family's most intimate memories, including grief, were often housed right here, where you now lie trying not to imagine cold eyes opening across the room. Historians still argue whether this fixation was spiritual, superstitious, or just culturally practical. But one thing is certain. For Victorians, the line between the living and the dead was whisper thin, especially after dark. You glance up again, and that embroidered painting above the headboard seems different. The woman's expression is softer, or sterner, or watching you. The flicker of the candle doesn't help. It casts moving shadows that play tricks on your mind, making furniture shift and wallpaper curl. And just in case your nerves weren't already shot, many Victorians believed in omens, signs that a spirit was near. A sudden chill, a flickering flame, a whisper you almost heard, all fair game. And in rooms like these, with so much fabric to muffle sound and shadow to bend light, your brain starts filling in the blanks. Your heart pounds slightly faster. You pull the covers up over your mouth, as if the blanket can protect you from apparitions. You remind yourself, it's just a room, just a bed. But then you remember that Victorians often died at home, right in their beds. Maybe even this one. A floorboard creaks in the hallway. A door swings slightly on its hinge. Maybe it's the draft. Maybe someone forgot to latch it. Or maybe, just maybe, the Victorians weren't wrong to be afraid of the dark. You squeeze your eyes shut and tell yourself it's fine. Just the wind. Just old wood settling. But then something upstairs thuds. Then a distant clatter from below. And now the true villain of the Victorian bedtime steps forward. Noise. It's ironic, really. A home full of heavy fabrics, thick drapes, and velvet wallpaper should be quiet. But Victorian houses had a way of amplifying every sound like a bad acoustic hall. You lie there in the dark, not daring to move. And yet the night sings around you with whispers, footsteps, creaks, and echoes that would make a horror movie jealous. The floors, made of timber, often warped with age. Every step, yours or someone else's, produces a chorus of groans and cracks. Even someone rolling over in the next room can sound like a ghost dragging chains. The walls, paper thin. Most were hollow or insulated with little more than plaster and lath, meaning you could hear conversations, coughs, or worse, someone snoring through the wall. And snoring back then wasn't muffled by memory foam and ceiling fans. It echoed. With no electric hums to drown it out, every breath and wheeze from your neighbors becomes a solo. You roll over, slowly, and even your own movement betrays you. The bed frame croaks. The mattress rustles like dry leaves. The canopy fabric sways and brushes ever so softly against itself, like whispers behind curtains. Your attempt to lie still is louder than you ever imagined. Historians still argue whether people slept more soundly in the past or simply dealt with it better. With nothing to compare it to, a noisy house was just life. But for you, used to white noise machines and the comforting thrum of city air, this quiet is loud, and not the good kind. Then there's the outside noise. Victorian streets weren't serene. Horses clopping past, street vendors yelling early in the morning, dogs barking, chimney sweeps climbing into flues, even the occasional fight in the alley. It all echoed through the narrow windows and thin panes of glass. And if your house was lucky enough to have gas lamps or early plumbing, you could enjoy the gentle hiss of the lines, or the not-so-gentle groaning of pipes as they contracted and expanded with temperature changes. Just one more lullaby in your nightly horror show. You take a deep breath, trying to block it all out, hoping your mind will finally give up and sleep will win. But it's not easy to drift off when every creak feels like an arrival, and every sound has you wondering, is someone else awake? In the quiet chaos of the night, you start to wonder if there's anything that could help you sleep. Maybe a warm drink, a calming scent, A gentle sedative wrapped in 19th century charm? Well, congratulations. You're about to discover the Victorian answer to melatonin. Or, more accurately, the fine line between sleep aids and sleep hazards. Let's start with the classic, laudanum. A potent mixture of opium and alcohol, laudanum was the NyQuil of its day, minus the childproof cap or dosage instructions. Prescribed for everything from coughs to heartbreak, it was especially popular among insomniacs and overworked parents. You could find it in syrup form, dropper bottles, and even candies. A few drops under the tongue, and you'd drift off in no time, hopefully. Of course, side effects included addiction, confusion, and sometimes waking up 2 days later wondering where your socks went. But hey, you weren't awake worrying about creaky floors. Prefer something herbal? Try valerian root, chamomile infusions, or lavender sachets stuffed into your pillowcase. These were gentler, more natural options, and they actually smelled nice. In fact, your pillow might be filled with a blend of dried herbs meant to soothe you into dreams. Just ignore the itchy stems poking your cheek. Historians still debate whether some of these herbal remedies truly worked or simply acted as calming rituals. There's evidence that the scent of lavender in particular was associated with rest, even then. But when that didn't work, stronger stuff was just a drawer away. Some households burned specific resins, frankincense or myrrh, to create a sense of calm. The rich might use scented oils, rubbing a little rose or sandalwood into their temples before bed. Of course, in poorly ventilated rooms, that also meant inhaling thick perfumed smoke for 8 hours. Sweet dreams, and mild lung irritation. And for the truly desperate, there was always chloroform. Yes, the same stuff used in surgery. Occasionally dabbed onto a cloth and sniffed lightly before bed. Not recommended unless you wanted your dreams to be written in Morse code by your nervous system. You try to imagine yourself reaching for a little brown bottle beside the bed, one marked with curling script and a cork. You take a cautious sip and instantly feel weird. Maybe sleepy, maybe slightly high. Hard to tell. The truth is, the line between help and harm was razor thin. A little soothed the nerves. A little more could make you see colors that didn't exist. Sleep came, but not always gently. So you lie back, nostrils full of musty lavender, mind buzzing with imaginary side effects, and hope that you'll drift off before the house gives you another reason to stay awake. You shift again, hoping the hint of lavender and crushed herbs under your cheek might finally lull you into rest. But no matter how you lie, something aches. Your lower back, your neck, your ribs. You realize with horror, this bed, this mattress, this entire sleep system just isn't meant for lying flat. And that's when it hits you. Victorians didn't always sleep lying down. In fact, many of them slept sitting partially upright, like exhausted statues propped against their headboards. You push yourself up slightly and feel an odd sense of relief. Lying flat feels unnatural, especially with the heaviness of the blankets, the stiffness of your collar, and the pressure from the lumpy mattress. Upright sleep wasn't just habit, it was necessity. Why? Well, start with digestion. Without modern medicine, heartburn, bloating, and indigestion were regular nighttime enemies. A meal of mutton stew, dense bread, and turnip pie didn't exactly go down smoothly. Sleeping upright meant less reflux and fewer middle-of-the-night gasps for air. Then there were the corsets, for women and occasionally men. Even when removed at night, their lingering effects made fully reclining uncomfortable. Ribs were compressed, waists reshaped, and muscles fatigued. A straight spine against a mound of pillows offered some relief, even if it felt like sleeping in a carriage seat. Historians still argue whether sitting up to sleep was more common among the ill or just a widespread tradition. But plenty of portraits and journal entries describe people arranging pillows in stacked formations, draping shawls around their shoulders, and keeping their heads tilted slightly forward. It was the default for many. Some even believed sleeping fully flat could attract spirits, or worse, resemble death. Lying down too still was seen as eerie, unnatural. In a time obsessed with the appearance of life, staying semi-upright in bed was almost life-affirming. You try it now, adjusting the mound behind your back. It's not comfortable, but you can breathe a little easier. Your heartbeat slows. The scratchy collar still presses your neck, but your lungs feel less constricted. The ceiling looms above you, fading into shadow, and for a moment, you almost believe sleep is coming. But just as your eyes begin to shut, your head dips forward awkwardly. A jolt, a neck crack. You lurch upright again. You're not dozing off. You're just leaning into exhaustion. Still, it's better than fighting the mattress. So you settle back again, angled, not lying, draped in weight, surrounded by shadows. And you think, maybe the Victorians weren't insane for sleeping like this. Maybe they were just adapting to a world that never gave them true rest. You sit there, halfway between sleep and stubborn survival, and your mind begins to wander. The fire's long gone. The cold has nestled into your bones. The silence is loud again, and yet, oddly, you start to dream. Not the subconscious kind, but the waking dreams Victorians took so very seriously. Because in this world, dreams weren't just dreams. They were messages, warnings, or sometimes full-blown prophecies. You blink slowly, drifting without moving. Victorians believed that what you dreamed revealed your character or your future. Entire books were published to interpret them. Dream dictionaries lined the shelves of curious readers, dreaming of teeth falling out, death in the family, dreaming of water, rebirth, or maybe pneumonia, depending on your current condition. Historians still argue whether this fascination with dream interpretation was rooted in spiritualism, superstition, or just psychological escapism. After all, this was the era of seances and spirit photography. Ghosts were believed to linger, and dreams were considered the place where they might say hello. Your eyes flutter shut again, and you imagine yourself in a Victorian parlor, seated at a mahogany table, scribbling last night's dreams into a journal with a goose quill. People shared their dreams over tea. Some women even brought dream diaries to social gatherings, hoping for interpretation from the group, like a parlor game, but with more ominous conclusions. And for those truly obsessed, there were dream maps, long scrolls that guided interpretation like a psychic subway system. Dreamed of a black cat standing on a windowsill while eating pears. There's a guide for that. You sigh. You're not sure what your current dream would count as. Something about drowning in blankets and being judged by a nightstand. Even Queen Victoria was rumored to have a strong belief in dream symbolism. She reportedly once postponed a trip after dreaming of a dark sea, later claiming it had saved her from a maritime accident. Whether true or exaggerated, it fit the times. Dreams weren't dismissed. They were debated, dissected, and sometimes feared. And the darker ones, nightmares, those were taken seriously. You might consult a physician, a clergyman, or even a psychic. And if it kept happening, perhaps you were cursed or possessed. or simply sleeping near too many poisonous dyes in your wallpaper. Yes, arsenic green was a thing. You shift slightly. The creak of the mattress grounds you. You are here. You are awake. Or maybe not. Sleep is weird now. Not deep, not light. Just drifting between candlelight and candle smoke. You wonder what your dreams will show tonight, or if you'll remember them at all. If nothing else, maybe your Victorian self would write them down. Publish them. Get them interpreted by someone with a handlebar mustache and a monocle. You close your eyes again, this time hoping that whatever comes, it brings no omens, just peace. Your body's finally heavy, not because you're relaxed, but because sleep is wearing you down like slow erosion. Everything, the cold, the noise, the itches, the creaks, has blurred into background static. And now, just when the weight of the night starts to dissolve into dream, the worst possible thing happens. It's morning, but not your kind of morning. Not soft light and bird song and filtered sunbeams through clean curtains. This is the Victorian version of morning, brutal, unfiltered, and deeply unnecessary. The first assault is sound. Someone in the hallway is already up. Maybe a maid dragging coal for the fire. Maybe your mother thumping down the stairs to boil water. Either way, the walls rattle with footsteps and shouting, not angry, just urgent. Everyone's up. That means you are too. There's no snooze button, no 5 more minutes. Victorian life was scheduled, and it started early, especially for the working class. Bakers rose before dawn, factory workers even earlier. And if you were wealthy, you were still expected to be presentable by breakfast, which started around 7:1, in full dress. And yes, for women, that meant corsets, first thing in the morning. Nothing says rise and shine like being cinched at the waist while sipping weak tea. You blink into the dim gray light filtering through the window. There's no alarm clock, just the slow glow of the sky and maybe the faint clang of a nearby church bell. If you're a child, someone might come shake your shoulder, not lovingly, just effectively. If you're a servant, you're already late. Historians still argue whether Victorian mornings were productive by necessity or simply cruel by tradition. But one thing is certain, they weren't built for slow risers. The moment your feet touch the freezing floorboards, your entire body stiffens like a folding chair. You're sore, you're stiff, and somehow you feel less rested than when you lay down. The bedclothes are thrown back. Cold air rushes in, and there's no coffee brewing in the next room. That wasn't common yet. Instead, it's weak tea, porridge that bites your teeth with blandness, and maybe, if you're lucky, yesterday's bread softened in milk. You stand slowly. Your knees creak like the furniture. Your neck cracks like old parchment. You survive the night. Barely. But don't celebrate yet. The bed must be remade, and not just thrown together. No, this is the morning bed ritual. Every layer, every sheet, every pillow must be fluffed, shaken, and placed just so. In some homes, beds were stripped daily and reassembled from scratch. In others, you simply turned it over and hoped the lumps would even out tomorrow. And don't forget the chamber pot. Someone has to deal with that. So you sigh. You look around the room, the candle stub, the fading coals, the piles of stiff blankets, now kicked askew. You did it. You slept in a Victorian bed. Barely. Now let all of that fade. Let the rattling windows quiet. Let the cold settle outside your reach. You're not really in that bed anymore. The canopy above you melts into nothing. The heavy blankets lift from your chest, and your lungs breathe deeply again. Your feet are warm now, wrapped not in scratchy wool but in weightless air. The fire in the hearth still flickers softly, not for warmth now, but for comfort. A background hum like distant waves. The chair in the corner no longer looks like a ghost waiting for your dreams. It's just a chair, quiet, still, harmless. The pillow beneath your head flattens gently, cradling the shape of your thoughts. Whatever you imagined in those long hours of Victorian night, you can release now. You're not tangled in lace. No collars, no chamber pots, no stiff mattresses pressing against your spine. The noises, the floor creaks, the footsteps, the whispers behind the wall. They've all blurred together like fog rolling into memory. What once kept you awake now rocks you gently toward sleep. And your breath, soft, steady, almost silent now. The kind of breath that comes only when everything lets go. You made it through that strange, beautiful, uncomfortable world. And now, in your own bed, wherever it is, however it feels, you're allowed to relax, to rest, to sleep. So melt into it. Let your limbs go heavy. Let your thoughts get slower. Let your eyelids drift where stories and sleep begin to blend. You're safe. You're warm. You're home. And the night is finally yours.